After him, though, it seems like there's a pretty consensus 102. And if there's somebody above Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it's almost always this guy, and that's Jonathan Taylor, who was probably my favorite prospect coming into this draft. And doubters kind of say he's a product of Wisconsin line, the system. But your charts, I was reading about him yesterday, they suggest otherwise. So what are the Colts getting in Taylor, and what do you expect short and long term for this guy in fantasy?
I was with you, by the way. I had Taylor as the RB1 in this class pre-draft. I never thought I would move off Taylor as the RB1. Like, I thought he'd go pretty easily, top 40. He went 41. I thought the landing spot would be perfect for him. I thought he'd be the first running back off the board, but alas, he wasn't. I went into Jonathan Taylor's tape. Like, obviously, we've all seen enough Wisconsin ball to know that Taylor was a baller. When I was studying him, I was really interested to see just how big of an advantage Wisconsin's offensive line was. And they definitely are better than the college average. Like, if you're just looking strictly at yards blocked per attempt, the metric that I chart, like, they're slightly above average, but they were definitely not a juggernaut offensive line. A.J. Dillon and DeAndre Swift both saw significantly more yards blocked per rush than Jonathan Taylor did last year. And I wrote about this on fantasypoints.com. I wrote a Jonathan Taylor profile on his fit with the Colts, and just looking back at, through some of his yards created numbers. And, not only was Wisconsin's offensive line, they were good, but not great. They also used a fullback a ton. Last year, Wisconsin had a fullback on the field on about a third of Jonathan Taylor's carries, and Taylor was actually more creative with the fullback off the field. Now, that probably has a little bit to do with personnel. When you don't have a fullback on the field, you're typically spreading the field a little bit more. You might get fewer defenders in the box. So there's a little bit of like context that's needed there. But I really struggle when people say, Taylor was a product of a great offensive line or a great scheme. I just don't think yards created showed that. I also have a hard time when people say Taylor does not have a lot of elusiveness. I chart missed tackles three different ways. I chart them through speed, power, and elusiveness. And elusiveness is, it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire's game. That's what he wins with. He don't win with speed and power, but Jonathan Taylor can win with speed, power, and elusiveness. I had Taylor charted with slightly more missed tackles forced per carry by elusiveness than speed and power. The fit with the Colts is just absolutely bananas good. I mean, look, we can debate all we want, and much smarter people can debate the pick, the value of the pick, all they want. But I'm just excited to see an extremely talented and creative back behind the most talented offensive line in the NFL. And that's all we can ask for fantasy football.
And you're charting the Taylor. I know you talk about pass protection and all the receiving game work in addition to creating as a runner, and tons of people are drawing to the fact that Rivers loves to pepper his running backs. He's certainly not an Austin Eckler or Danny Woodhead like we've seen 100 reception type of seasons out of. But did you see anything about Taylor's receiving game that tells you, hey, maybe this guy could handle an additional 30, 50 catches or so?
Right. So again, like, some context is needed about the way Wisconsin runs their offense. I mean, they were the third most run-heavy team in the Power 5 last year. They called a run on 59% of their plays. Boston College, A.J. Dillon's team was at 63% run-heavy, and if you flip it, like LSU, FSU, Vanderbilt, like all these other programs were pass first. When Wisconsin did pass, they tried to get the ball to Jonathan Taylor last year, and it worked. Taylor was targeted on like a third of his routes last year, which is the highest rate I've ever charted for a running back. And he was actually only second in the class to Zach Moss in yards gained per route run. So Wisconsin schemed the ball to Taylor in the passing game last year, tried to get him the rock out in space. And when they did, it was pretty damn good. I mean, Taylor got 26 balls for 250 yards, had 5 scores. Like, I talked about this in my article, but like, it's kind of I view this as almost the same way as when Melvin Gordon came out. Like, Gordon did not catch the ball at Wisconsin, but the Chargers and Phillip Rivers turned him into a very good pass catcher. Actually, I think Melvin Gordon is a much better pass catcher than he is a rusher. I think Taylor has underrated 3-down appeal in Indy. It'll just come down to Frank Reich. And I just don't think Frank Reich views a bell cow back as a necessity in his offense. And frankly, like, that's the smart approach. You should want to keep your guys fresh. This year, I think Taylor and Mack will be a 1A, 1B type committee. And we might even see Nyheim Hines' role phased out, and we'll just use Mack and Taylor more in the passing game.
Absolutely, yeah. And with Marlon Mack, he does have a little bit of an injury history too, so I definitely see this being that 1A, 1B, but if he goes down, it could be this, yeah, exactly, right? Like behind that offensive line, if you're getting 70% of the touches, I mean, if that offense takes that next step with Rivers there, that could just be, a fantasy season winner. So, definitely long-term, Max, a free agent coming up this year, so we know that, but a lot of people, might be overlooking the fact that this guy's year one upside is enormous. RB1 upside, and I think it's a matter of when he takes over this backfield to monopolize, 50 to 60% of it. We'll see. But I love him too. So everything you highlighted there is just getting me excited over here.